something dramatically changed in Zoom in terms of like responsiveness of the UI. Good to go. All right. Then, hello everyone. Welcome to this product community event. My name is Alex. This is an event that is streamed live. So if you want to enjoy this either on Zoom or on YouTube or on LinkedIn, we're actually already doing it. But if you want to have maybe your friends, family, and colleagues enjoying this as well, please share this link while we are still starting this session. You also already see here our Q&A and answer poll codes and QR codes. So feel free to really go to slido.com with the code or scan the QR code for the Q&As and also the question we will put on later if you want to participate and contribute today. What is it about today? Today we have Joy here. He is the lead data scientist with DCMN. He will talk today about using data maturity models for PLG, product-led growth. So we're happy to have him here today, and he will be able to intro himself in just a second. Who I am. So my name is Alex. I'm a director of product at Product People. I'm doing product management since over 9 years. I was also a software developer and a co-founder of my own startup that lasted for 2 years. I'm right now doing a lot of work in product leadership, product vision and strategy building, execution, road mapping. I worked for companies like the World Health Organization, GfK, Hey Jobs and Co., but also in the B2C space, like with Emma and nebenan and Blinkist. I have a background in web design development. That's what my diploma is from. And as you may hear that in my accent, I'm speaking natively German, and I hope you enjoy my English and I'm speaking clearly for you today. Who are we as product people? We are interim product managers and product leaders, as well as product ops managers. We have over 42 in-house employees at the moment, and we are growing. I'm sharing the slides later about our hiring. This is how we make money, right? Our interim product management work, and we give back through free events like this one, which you're enjoying right now, but also through our very large product community, Europe's largest, by the way, with over 30,000 members on LinkedIn. So if you don't follow us yet on LinkedIn, please do so. We have sometimes funny memes, but we also follow the latest trends and share our opinion, but also tips and tricks how to navigate in these difficult product management domains. And we are slowly getting into the topic. And before we handing over the microphone to Joy, we have this very first question to you. As a product person, what is your level of engagement with quantitative data today? You have three options. And please, again, use Slido here, either the QR code or with the code here on the website. We have three answers. Your team use data in almost every task. Seems to be a very good answer, right? Your team use data 50% or less than 50% of their task. Or answer C, your team rarely or never uses data in their tasks. And maybe you can even replace tasks with decision making. We're giving you a couple of seconds to fill out here, and then I will give you the average, which also determines a little bit what the audience is today. So Joy can maybe even alter his presentation and talk today a little bit to the answers. Giving you a couple of more seconds. You can maybe even also guess what is the right answer, right? Is always working with data the right answer? Maybe 50%, a good balance, maybe even.
I mean, honestly, for me, the right answer is that we're not looking for a right answer. We're just looking for how people work because I think
Yeah.
all three of these buckets need help. I mean, if your teams are using data in almost every task, then
Yeah.
I have to ask, okay. But yeah, I don't know. It's just
You're
icebreaker.
spoiling here, but I got the answers in. So we have 30% around answer A, right? Almost on almost every task. Then we have around 70% in answer B, so less than 50%, around 50%. None of the people answered with never use data, quantitative data here. So that's great from my opinion, but now I will really look forward also to Joy, what you are saying. You also spoiled it already. Maybe none of the answers was really good. But happy to learn from you now today what you have to say to us in terms of usage of quantitative data in product led growth. With that, I will stop sharing my screen and I'm heading over to you, Joy. Take it on. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's exciting, and I'm really happy you started with that question because now with the results, I think a lot of my content would just make more sense. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, and we should get started. Just let me know if you guys can see my screen. Okay,
Absolutely, it's
perfect.
dark mode. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, let's start with what we're going to talk about today. We will cover this concept of data maturity models, and they're essentially a model that we can use for product-led growth strategies. But I'll come to all of that. I think the biggest question everyone usually has is, who am I, and what's my background? Where do I come from? And to be perfectly honest, this is a very fundamental question because every time I think about this, I have to think that there should be one single purpose that someone is here for, and I really can't find anything other than food. I mean, these were these were the two pictures where I'm genuinely just happy, and yeah, it's I think the sole purpose to be here is food. But on the side, of course, and to pay the bills, I've been a data scientist for about the last 10 years, and I've worked with various organizations. Initially, I was in California in Silicon Valley, and there I worked a lot with companies like Mavericks, Mercedes, FedEx. But I moved to Berlin about 4 years ago, and that's where I started working with companies like Brighter AI, etc. And predominantly, I've been a data scientist, but primarily, I've been working with product teams a lot because we don't work in a vacuum. We work together to build something that then helps the product roadmap or any kind of decision-based roadmap, for instance. And I noticed that there's always these two different camps when we talk about product and data, right? And we have our different languages, we have our different concepts that we care about. And the goal was to really have this one camp where we can not only share knowledge, but also do something cohesively and collaboratively together. So that's why the name One Camp is here. It's something we started with two of my co-founders, Antonia and Pierre. And we really want to encourage this where we say, okay, instead of looking at this as a service or a service agent relationship, a transactional relationship, why don't we sit down together and then build it out? Anyway, we'll get to what one camp is and why that's relevant, but let's circle back to where is the opportunity for data? Because this is a product conference or product event. Where does data really fit in? Right. So to answer that, let's look at this study. It's quite an extensive study, actually, done by Microsoft, where they just wanted to find out over a period of almost 20 years what percentage of the ideas and what percentage of the things that they created actually moved the needle in terms of what they cared about, right? So if I build, I don't know, 100 things, how many of those things are actually giving me value? And the answer is quite low. It's about a third. Um, for me, it's quite low, but to be really honest, when I present this, most members of the audience go, "Yeah, that makes complete sense." Um, so, and these are not just startups. I mean, Microsoft ran it internally, but also looked at other companies. So, if you look at some examples, Rocket Mortgage, Microsoft, 30% of these essentially ideas that you build are giving you value, but even for Netflix, it's further lower. So At this point, you have to think, okay, maybe this is where data could help, right? It could guide us in terms of what we build and what we learn from it, so that we can use those learnings or outcomes to bake into our strategy and then just get better, right? Just any skill you learn where you learn, you start learning a new skill and then you realize these are good things and these are bad things, and you start to get better and better. So that's kind of where data enters this entire playground. But as soon as you start thinking about, okay, now I really understand why we need the data. The follow-up question is how much? And this goes back to the question we asked at the beginning. So if we were to look at these three lanes for product data plans, and this is essentially what we asked you, right? There's the no data side where none of the decisions or tasks are driven by data. It's all intuition based, and well, I feel that we should do this thing. Then there's some data, which got about 70% of the vote. And this is why I've also put it in the middle, because this is the most realistic, close to reality we have, which is we do take some decisions still by intuition. People have experience and people would like to bake that experience into their decisions, of course. But we have a lot of qualitative feedback. You're asking your customers and consumers, like, hey, what did we do well? What did we not do well? You don't have access to data because this is, again, this two-camp theory where you request something, maybe a BI platform, maybe a dashboard, maybe an insight, and you get it from the data in terms of deliverable. You don't really play around with yourself, which makes more sense. And then, of course, there's lots of data, which, everybody has access to the data. Everyone, the product teams, sales teams have access to BI platforms. Everybody can see everything, and a lot of the decisions are taken primarily by data. So 70%, 30% on the last side. Now, what's interesting is what do you guys think happens when I present this? And generally what I do is I will just present the slide and let people think about it a little. Because when you present something like this, I think it's quite natural to think, okay, it's like a get better plan, right? So there's middle, but I want to go to lots of data, right? And so, okay, if we can just get to a point where I have access to the BI platform, maybe we'll do better. And that right there is something we need to change. That we should not focus on the amount of data as the most critical metric. What we should focus on is meaning. This is something you want to optimize for. And this is something where we say, rather than deciding, and this is the question is really like a trap to set you guys into this thing, that what we should be asking you is, do you have no meaning, some meaning, lots of meaning? Another way to sort of wrap this around is think about insight over noise. So insight is just something, you look at a dashboard, you look at a data, you look at a metric, and you get an insight. Oh, we're doing better, we're doing worse, etc. Noise is when you look at something that then just confuses you because you thought you were doing better. And then you looked at another metric and you're like, well, now I don't know, right? And ideally, I think right now we're in the middle, which is we have a lot of insights, but we also have a lot of noise, right? Because we're tracking everything we can because we can, we are. And the goal would rather be, even with small amounts of data, you want to you want to increase this insight to noise ratio such that when you get the insight, the noise does not overwhelm that insight. It's easy for you to say, okay, I wanted to know, are we doing better in this aspect? And I know, and I'm done. I'm good. So that's really the potential of the data that you have in your organization. Is not the breadth of it or the depth of it, but what it's providing back to you. All right. So now let's think about that. Like we talked about this two-camp theory, right? When we know we work in this close relationship where product and data are interacting together. And before we did this, I always thought, why not look at what the issue is or what the hurdles are today, right? So a lot of people probably know this. There's a problem space and a solution space. And in theory and in textbooks, they sort of interact with each other. One blends into another, one blends, and then the solution sort of guides the problem. But in reality, it looks more like this, where there's a teeny divide because one camp seems to own a little bit of the other space. So product generally resides more in the problem space, where you're, designing the problem statement, you're doing discovery, and you're also thinking about the solutions, but the ownership is really on the problem space. For the solution space, we're also interacting with you about the problem space and we're learning what the problem is, but implementation and execution relies a little bit more on the data space. And so now there's this sort of imbalance, right? Because product, while having a lot of ownership, does not have the skills necessary to like implement that particular feature, for instance. Data, on the other hand, while having the skills to do that, is not owning their roadmap. To us, it's just another ticket request unless we see the broader picture of where it fits in. And this is what exactly we wanted to clear with this whole one camp theory, that instead of having divides, why not sit down at the table sooner and do this together, right? And this is essentially the crux of the problem. And like we can run through this, but what we started doing is let's validate this theory. So before we just assume that this is how things work, we went ahead and actually asked one camp about the other. So one of my co-founders, Antonia, she posted a question and saying, hey guys, what's the toughest thing about working with data teams? Are they not available? Do they not understand product? Do we not understand them, or anything else? And the results look something like this, right? About 40, as I can't see the screen, 48% said they're just not around, right? And of course, we don't understand them, and they don't understand us. But the big chunk is that they're not available. And when we read this, we thought, okay, that's striking. But what's interesting is that when I did the same and I asked, okay, what hurts most with work while working with product teams? Are our objectives not aligned? Are we working towards two different goals? Does product not have an interest in data? Are we speaking different languages because there's a barrier in communication? Or are there just no processes to collaborate together? What's interesting is about 39% said, yeah, we're just, working towards different goals. Um, so now this is a little concerning. But if you look at the picture together, what it's really saying is product teams think that, well, the data camp is not available. The data camp thinks, yeah, we have different objectives. It's very easily it's very easy to solve this if you just get them together in a room and then align on objectives, right? It takes out about like half of the product team's problems and about 40% of the problems that data professionals have. So this was good. This was good because even though it was a small sample set and we didn't really, diversify, like again, it wasn't the most accurate study, but we got an impression. It's called evidence, not data. We got some evidence that this divide does exist, right? And we would like to solve it with this one camp. Now, so far, all of this is metaphorical. Okay, we'll have one camp, but like we're not really building camps, right? Like, what does one camp really mean? And a simple example is a product trio, which I think a lot of us in the room are aware of. But let's elaborate. It's not something we came up with, but it's actually pioneered really well by Teresa Torres, I would recommend. But the idea is that you have a single functional unit, and it says trio, but you can, of course, have 4, 5, 6 people. This is a functional unit that owns any particular project, any particular roadmap, any particular feature. And there's usually a mix of talent here. So there's a product manager, designer, and an engineer. And it solves a lot of the problems we just, encountered because A, they have to be available because I'm pretty sure they're aligning more frequently, being part of a unit. So the availability factor is a little bit more alleviated. And also, of course, their objectives are aligned because they're doing this together as a team, not making service requests to the engineer. But this is not something new. This was, I think, like 2020 that people came up with as, product trios. How is it relevant in this aspect of data? And yes, sorry, I think I mentioned Teresa Torres, but yeah, that's a great resource if someone wants to check it out. What we want to talk about is that if you think about these product trios as modules, you don't have to be the same static module throughout the life cycle of a feature. And I'll walk you through it, right? So let's assume this is the life cycle of a feature. It's the gross oversimplification. But let's say you start a discovery, you're defining, you're planning, then you go to UX UI design, you start developing, you run experimentation, testing, do a soft launch, feature launch. Let's just assume that this is simple path that we do to launch that particular feature. The interesting thing that we observe that we can do is, let's say you start with the discovery phase with this particular product trio, which is a manager, a designer, and an analyst, right? So an analyst is basically looking through historical data, gathering evidence, guiding your discovery, guiding your definitions, and also, of course, planning out the route, because then you know exactly what kind of insights and also like knowledge you've learned from the past feature slash customer feedback. What you can observe is, like, let's say you continue that path and now you're at development, you're even running experimentation and testing. Here's the interesting part. So here, from the data side, you can stick to the data analyst, right? But now you're at a point where you set up all those pipelines, right? So the analytics data and all of those are churning out. The data analyst is not the most appropriate person anymore. What's more essential here is a data scientist, because now you're trying to build models for questions that you're not even asking, right? So when you were defining, you had specific questions and specific ideas that you wanted to implement with the features, and an analyst would just, give you those, I don't know, answers. But a data scientist is a little bit more open-ended, where they're looking at the experimentation, they're looking at these several, multivariate tests you're running, and then designing a structure that distills all that information into something useful. Because if you're not asking the right questions, how are you going to get the right answers, right? And this is interesting, that not only can we start looking at these cohesive units, product and data, but we can alter that based on our needs throughout the life cycle of our journey, like a feature journey, for example. And at this point, I think most people will shyly nod their heads, but I know what they're thinking. They're thinking, yes, but how exactly do we know when do we need what? Like, it's nice with a simple example, but then how do I really know which role fits best? And this is where the maturity model and the data radar maps come in, because it's a positional map of everything data in your organization. So if you look at it, it's a simple spider map, but we've taken a 5 key aspects of data: organization, taxonomy, what kind of tools and processes you're using, what's the level of fluency of data, right? And of course, how much are you really utilizing your data? And if you look at the backbone of it, you'll see that it's not a linear scale, even though it looks linear, right? It gets more complex as you go, because as we know, a team of 2 people setting up a data framework is not the same as a team of 200. And the higher up you go, the more complex and the more process design gets complicated. So what we do is let's say we'll have workshops, and we'll ask people questions and say, okay, let's take data organization. We want to understand, how efficient are you in storing your data? What kind of data sources do you have? What are the architectures? And this is what it will possibly look like, right? There are certain questions. And one very key aspect here is, it's important to keep in mind that we're not here to design the best, greatest data framework. We're here to design what's relevant for you. So even though in the first table up there, you see you scored 20 out of 50, let's say there's 10 questions, each get a 0 to 5, 20 out of 50 doesn't sound so good. But we say, hey, hang on. Instead of just blindly giving you a score, tell us what you care about, what your company needs right now, and what you don't care about. And that's that relevance angle that comes in. It says, right now, I don't really care about access and authorization protocol. So that's not important to us. So even if you score low on it, it doesn't factor into your score, right? And so 15 out of 30 is a better representation of what are the key things you should be focusing on, and what are the things that you should, implement right away. Anyway, so let's say, for sake of clarity, we go through all of this and we get something like that, right? So we've done this workshop, we've covered all these various aspects, and we give you a graph like that. The idea is to look at it and see, okay, we're doing well in certain aspects, not so well in certain aspects. But what is what does that really mean, right? So let's take this guy. Here you can see organization is quite high, but utilization is quite low. How would that look like in a real life scenario? So here's almost real life example, but let's say you ask for a particular dashboard or churn metric, and we delivered this, and you can see it. There's the last 30 days, the three bars are the users that are searching for song, playing the song, and sharing the song. There's a 2.6, 2.6% conversion number. And it's clear what's happening, that, people are searching, not playing as much, but they're definitely not sharing, right? Or for me as a data person, just satisfying the ticket, the acceptance criteria is show me the metric. I'm done, right? I've given you what I need to do. I've given you access. You can play around. It's only when you talk to from the organization side and then the pipeline side, it's really well done. The reason utilization is low is that once we deliver this, we're no longer in the picture. We're no longer in the room, right? And for most product people, this is the beginning of the conversation. Like, that's great. Now, can you please tell me why that's happening? Which user cohort is dropping? Why are active users not sharing content? And so utilization only goes up, and I'll cover what are the elements of it. It only goes up when they have recourse to do more with it than just get a static dashboard and say, okay, I get the message, but how do I drive that into a actionable item or an action or a next step? And so this is something we've noticed, that if we're able to give you these, and we'll get into the utilization part, but if we're able to give you these representations which tell you where it's hurting, then you'll be able to know this is exactly what I need from a data perspective or a particular process point of view. So let's do this. Since we talked about utilization, let's do, and again, this is usually an audience play, but let's just run through it. So let's do two truths and one lie, right? So I'm going to tell you three things. Two of these are true. One of them is a lie. So the first one is that 2020, the ratio of unique to replicated data is 1 to 9. So we do this a lot where we create secondary data sets, which is just additional features from the raw data. And that ratio is 1:9, according to this claim. Then data scientists, just myself, we spend about 80% of our time pre-processing the data. So while it says on paper that we're really building complex models, about 80% of our time is just cleaning the data, analyzing the data, exploratory data analysis, and all of that. And the last one says currently 25% of the data goes unused for analytics. Any guess, Alex, any guess which one is not sitting right?
Yeah, I think like 1 and 2 are correct, and 3 is not right, and the number is higher on 3.
That's perfect. How high do you think that number is?
It's above 70%.
That's wow, that's perfect. So 73% of that data was unused, right? And to me, when I heard this, I thought, my friend told me this, and I genuinely thought he was exaggerating for the purpose, but he wasn't. He actually shared this, and I thought, that's crazy. Why are we creating like so much analytics, insights, and 73% of it goes unused, right? So to do that, let's focus on this utilization part. We're what, 20 minutes. And we're gonna stick to this particular realm of the maturity model. If you just spin this around a little bit, you'll see, I mean, essentially it's a triangle, and you can split it up. You can split up this triangle into three parts, right? And I can see, Alex, you're bending your head. So like, I'm gonna straighten up for you, and we'll tell you what these three facets are. So the three things to really drive utilization from a stakeholder point of view come down to these. And of course, there's more. These are some things that these are the tabs that we've found move the needle quite a lot. So first is engagement, and there's time to insights, and of course, knowledge share. Let's talk about engagement, right? So I think a lot of people are aware with the NPS model and what it serves for, gathering valued customer feedback. But I think most of the times we use NPS as an external tool. Very rarely do we use it as an internal tool to just ask the stakeholders that we're building things for how engaged they are with that. Because that metric would say, we have several dashboards, but engagement is so low because either they don't understand it, maybe they don't have access to it, maybe it's just like cognitive overload. There's so much going on that they can't even figure out where to focus on, right? So measuring that is a good way to at least start the baseline with why are people not using it? Because they're not even engaged, right? Then, and this is the simplest thing to do actually, is time to insight. So from the moment you request a particular answer, insight, data, to the point where you actually get it, if you measure that time, this can be minutes, hours, days, and even weeks, right? And ideally, you want to keep it as low as possible. And this is quite simple to do because if you're using any kind of task management software, Trello, Asana, I'll give you an example for Jira, you can go to your dashboard or you can go to these insights and see for each different story type or task type, what's your average number of, I believe this is in hours, right? Exactly. And so you will be able to see not only what's happening because maybe you're finishing bugs sooner than tasks. That means you're really driving those bug tickets. And so this gives you an idea of like, of course they're not utilizing it because these improvements or these requests take weeks. And that's far too long for someone to like hold on to that request and then come back to utilize that deliverable. And finally, knowledge share. So this is something we're trying to do here, which is it. We're aware that it's quite difficult for a product person to enter the room of data and then just hit the ground running and say, okay, I understand every dashboard, every statistical insight. And so having these sessions where we talk about primarily how we got there. So instead of just showing you the end product of a model, of a dashboard, etc., why not walk you through the process and say, okay, so this is the data source, this is the taxonomy, this is what we did, this is the process, and this is what comes out. I think that will add a level of clarity that will then help you utilize that final product. And I think that's pretty much it. We're at 24 minutes, which is good, but let me just say one last thing. So the other last thing is, it's also not a static artifact, right? So let's say we ran this with you in Q1 2024. We let you run this yourself. So we enable you to run this again, because what you'll really do after Q1 2024 is you run this, you'll know, okay, so immediate action items are A, B, and C, because, I don't know, organization is low, we don't have a taxonomy. And whatever you do will, of course, evolve your framework, right? You will get better. And this is key because then you'll see, yes, whatever we did as a return on investment, our utilization went up. We have a defined taxonomy now. And this is, I think, one of the most helpful things about this positional map, that you can decide the cadence, quarter, weeks, months, but you can always make sure that you're measuring in which way you're evolving your framework. And that's it. I think just to round up, like remove these boundaries, let's customize the product tiers as needed, and then just measure data engagement, like internal engagement and utilization, measure it so that we don't get that 73% number. And I believe that's me. I'm gonna stop sharing, I believe.
Thank you. Joy, awesome. Thank you for the presentation. And I mean, also absolutely thank you for the presentation quality. Like I was like, product people, we have to bring animations in our presentations as well. My head was rotating all the time. So I will take over screen sharing for the QR code for the Q&A. So just give me 1 second. And here we go. So to the audience, scan that QR code, put the QR number, the code number into Slido, and send basically your questions in there. And in a couple of seconds and 2 minutes, we will then ask Joy the questions. While we are waiting, give you a little bit more information also what product people is doing. I already said, like we make money as well by being interim or fraction product managers or product leaders as well. And we do this on the basis of like 3 to 9 months, depending on the role. For example, parental leaves usually take longer. I'm very happy that also both genders are doing this parental leaves nowadays, especially at least in Germany and Europe. We also do product coaching and consultancy in or program management and product operations. And we also do product discovery in terms of workshops, in terms of like helping the teams on site, and also like appraisals, how they do product discovery, quite in line with the topic of Joy also today. This is a selection of some clients which we served and are still serving in the B2C space and also in the B2B space. A bit also of numbers here. We are, as I said, 42 people. I'm very proud that we have a majority in our leadership team is woman. That gives us, I think, also a competitive edge in terms of like how we think and act. And we have always supported 200 cross-functional product teams across 70 plus clients, from Series A startups to publicly listed companies. And here are the happy faces. I'm also somewhere there, but as you see, a quite diverse background from various nations and cultures, and also genders and identities. And with that, this is basically the last slide, and we are now entering the Q&A phase. I, as a host or moderator today, I have the honor to ask the first question to Joy. Like, you had in this one slide the analysis of a survey where product manager said like data analyst, the data team is not available. Is this maybe it's the root cause also that data analysts do too much analysis? They are swamped with too many, create more and more dashboards. And if you say so, what is an ideal collaboration mode between post actions that you only ask what is needed and data is also coming back and say like, you don't need it, like let's do less and less, basically more of less.
Yeah, no, I mean, you actually answered that quite well, but it's very interesting you mentioned that because the never available um, does not just come from incessant requests from product team. So as the data team, we get requests from sales, upper level management. I mean, we will be working on a very critical feature launch, for example, and upper management will come and say, well, there's a board meeting next week. Can we just, whip this up? And so we're constantly context switching between different things. And so, of course, that hurts us. It hurts the turnaround time for those critical tickets. And this is why I think the never available is not really a lack of interest, but it's just us being swamped and treating every ticket on Jira as a one-off that I just need to get off, right? So ideally, and I've worked in certain teams which actually do have a, the cohesive unit that I talked about, one of the biggest advantages of that is that there's also a layer of protection, which means that you don't get water cooler conversations of, hey, I noticed you're working on this analytics platform. How difficult is it to, get this done? You're protected, and you say, well, maybe we'll discuss it in our planning, and I'll get back to you, but possibly not looking. This is something we'll have to push back on. And so, yes, the way I would look at it is, if let's say on the lines of a product trio, you start with discovery instead of already divvying up work, saying, okay, you do this and I'll do that. What, like, make it a collective brainstorm, and then you'll automatically know who's good at what, right? So let's say we're trying to build a ride sharing app, and as you design this discovery process and as you're sort of baking the feature, you'll know what kind of evidence you need, what kind of tests you need to run, what kind of experimentation you need to run. And so when a data person has knowledge of all of these, for us, we see the bigger picture and where the things we do fit in, which also adds it, like the way we develop that inside dashboard, even that metric changes, right? Because instead of doing one-offs where you're just doing show me churn metric for feature X on platform Y, we are now realizing, okay, I remember I did this for this particular piece, and now we're adding a feature on there, or we're adding a like particular piece to it, and so this essentially enhances that deliverable, and also it's just so much better to work with someone with some known history, because every time we get a new task, we have to be like, wait, so what's this about again? Oh, right. Yeah, I remember working on this 3 months ago, but okay. So yeah, I think there's no one size fits all, but generally starting together in the same room is a good path to go.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you. And then the follow-up I'm seeing is like you mentioned the product trio, which is actually a very stable construct, right? Because you can even play the democracy in that, right? You have two opinions saying, yes, let's go with that, right? Let's not argue any further. Like, and you, in your one slide, you asked, or you said like, maybe let's exchange the developer out, put the data person in. What's your opinion on creating out of the trio maybe a quadruple, a pentagon, expanding the team? Have you seen that working out, or does it bring too much more complexity?
No, I mean, that's honestly closer to the reality, which is I don't think they're rigid three people or three team members that just move on, but I think it usually starts like that, as you mentioned. that there's a designer, a product manager, and maybe lead engineer. And then as you evolve, you sort of add on. So you add on a data scientist, maybe you add on like another business development. And this is completely subjective to what you're building. But as you add on, it should be a unit that goes on. So it shouldn't be I added a new person or a role, and then 3 weeks or 4 weeks later, that person is no longer, right? It should be something that you do at least for a significant period of time. So that because otherwise it's the same thing. You're just coming in a team, going out, coming in, going out, right? And that is not helpful either. And to go back to your initial question about democracy, I think I would generally say from experience, even though it sounds great to have a democratic team, I think that there should be a little bit more weight on the product manager, just
Mm.
because of the skill set and the experience. Because as much as I would love to weigh in on, I don't know, what feature design is better, maybe the designer knows better, right? And so just playing to people's strengths is better than saying let's just decide together, because I don't know about all the time.
Oh, thank you for killing democracy in the teams.
But
I think we have to cycle back on the very first question and on your answer because it was a question like, what do you recommend in how to balance slash prioritize certain data insight over others? Maybe you have a specific example here in the work you did in the past.
yeah, so first and foremost, I think again, there's no, I wouldn't say there's a one size fits all, but um, if we go back to simple principles, so just forget about what data you have and what we're collecting. Just ask yourself, what is it that you need an answer for? And try to keep that question as like simple scoped as possible. Because if we have a question like, I want to understand how comfortable my users are using this app when they go here, that's already a big blown up scope, right? If you blow it down to like, I want to understand which, I don't know, color template or which particular icon is just more closer or stickiness, for example, is better, it reduces the scope. And instead of there's the thing that I recently learned from Antonio, I think like this concept of XY problem where like you come with the solution in mind, right? And so there, any amount of insights that we build is really going back to your confirmation bias because you have an idea of what the answer is and you're just looking for evidence to validate it, right? So that's what I would say is try to refrain from that. Try to refrain from saying, so what we need is X for problem Y, but rather say, look, guys, we have a problem Y. What do we have that can solve that answer? And try to keep Y as small as possible, right? Because then what will happen is if you're able to objectively express that, problem description to someone who's in the data side or the tech side, they will understand the problem statement. They'll go back and figure out what resources they have available and come to you with here are your options, right? And this is a little bit more bound than saying, no, actually, we were thinking more of this because it already dilutes the solution if you're coming with this proclivity towards, well, actually, we were looking for
Mm.
more of an X, not this. And that doesn't usually, it can be painful for both sides, right? Because that then we think, wait, but there's so many other things that I could show you, but I think you're kind of attached to this solution. So it's
Mm.
difficult for us to converge, basically. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Reminds me a little bit of a work with a team where we ran an A/B test and we wanted to the team democratically speaking voted for extending the A/B test because the results that the A/B test was showing were not the ones we hoped for. No,
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit extreme, but there's this
yeah.
brilliant saying which says you can never logic someone out of a place that they went to without logic.
Mm,
So, we think myself included, have, I think as developers, we're definitely proud of the work we do. So, there have been situations where I've presented something and I've been just so sure that this is the thing that I've been blind to people going like, wait, but I don't know, it just doesn't make sense. You're like, no, it should make sense. So yeah, I think that's something we can all learn. But yeah, I'm no stranger to that problem.
absolutely good description. Thank you. I have a great question here about biases. What strategies do you usually employ to identify and then mitigate potential biases in data analysis, particularly in the context of product-led growth? And I think the person asking this is like the product-led growth is, I think, a term that came very big, maybe even last year, right? And it's like, let's in quotes kill sales-led, right? Because they only come with their opinions and it's not data-fied, etc. Right, a product-led has more like the data aspect to it. So yeah, strategies to employ and identify and mitigate potential biases.
Um, to be honest, it's very tricky. I mean, I can tell you from a technical perspective or just like a looking at the data and the outcome if there's an inherent bias in it. Because the way we sort of define bias is, if I design a system and the system provides an answer, right? But given, let's say, a different input, I'm still sort of leans towards a certain answer. I think that's bias for us. That's really explaining it very roughly. I think the reason it's tricky because it's not as simplistic a system like that, right? Like it's not input, system, output. It's input, systems, people's opinions, processes, and workflows, and then you sort of bake into the outcome or the metric. And trying to quantify those is very difficult, right? So the way we would at least look out for bias is if we can't defend the outcome to a completely objective audience, I think there's some level of bias involved, right? Because if I don't know something, let's say I don't know how to cook a particular thing, but I just know why we're putting these ingredients in these proportions. I think that's enough for me to defend that I'm not doing it just because it's all how I've always done it, right? That usually works well where there are moments where we might suspect that there's a bias in this outcome or this decision we've taken. And then the product person or the data person will walk us through, like, okay, so this is what's happening and these are the pieces. And if you're aligned on that, you could sort of eliminate, okay, there wasn't a bias in this decision. But more often, what can also happen is people just go like, oh, well, I looked at the thing and the way I interpreted was this. Okay, there's a piece missing because we don't know how your interpretation can be quantified, or like there's no evidence to say, okay, that makes sense. And so usually that's a marker for us. But again, that could be completely wrong. So I think I don't know, depends a lot on the ways of working, I would say. And if there are, let's say, rituals and processes to when you make decisions and make outcomes, to then inform everybody in the room how that decision was taken, I think there's a good possibility you'll eliminate bias because that air gets much more clearer and transparent as opposed to, yeah, we just went this way and that's how we've done it before. And so that opaqueness can definitely hurt and could always come from an inherent bias.
Mm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. Controversial question. Are you looking forward that the product managers are being replaced by AI and not making any biased decisions anymore? You're just talking with the rational machine.
So I kind of disagree with the question because if you think about the AI that's taking those decisions, right?
Mm.
A lot of that GPT-5 and so on are trained on interactions with product managers who will have their inherent biases, right? So unless we find a group of humans who have absolutely zero bias and their data is used to train the model, it's
Mm.
very difficult to say that the AI on paper might, because there are safeguards and guidelines. I'm not going to say everything is right or everything is left, but you can still sort of translate the inherent bias of, like you said, product led versus sales led. So it's no surprise that now when you ask these kind of AI models, they're not going to push towards sales driven or like sales driven growth, right? And you
Yeah.
can almost see the connection of like, okay, this makes sense because the data it's learning from is being driven with that bias. And so it's a challenge, and I'm sure some of the AI models will come out that will eliminate that bias. But I think we're okay for now. But yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a newbie also here on our stream, which is very, very good. So this person has a question like, so I'm new to the field. Are there any other emerging trends you are experiencing in how companies are using data to revolutionize their products?
Hmm. Uh, hard for me to answer that because I'm not really sure of what's trending and what's not trending. But
Mm.
I think, and one thing I hope is trending is we have this fascination with data being absolute and perfect, right? Like the whatever the data scientist slash analyst says, just treat it as gospel. And honestly, it puts so much pressure on us to be completely precise and accurate. And I think we're noticing as we talk to each other more that neither party expects that. Neither party thinks that it has to be pinpoint precise or it's not even useful. I think this win or learn approach is trending, which is we want to know something. Maybe we'll get to a ballpark. Maybe it won't be precise, but please still build that so that we get closer to where we need to go. And this, I think, a lot of companies could always benefit from adopting, which is instead of worrying, is the A/B test, like I said, completely statistically significant? Is it exactly what we hope for? Is it completely accurate? Why not run it with the intention of I want to learn here. I want an outcome. I just don't want a result. And then iterate, right? And those iterations will eventually lead you closer to where you need to go. But iterate. Don't just be stuck in this. No, it has to be, unless it's perfect, I don't think we can use the answer. It's like, no.
Mm.
So I hope that's a trend that companies use. And if you're new in the field, you should always be excited to, propagate that. Why not? I mean, both parties benefit. Product teams will get iterations faster, like deliverables faster. We as data teams will hopefully some of that pressure will be alleviated, right? We can be like, okay, I can give you that sooner because I don't need to worry about being 100% precise and reliable. All data will have certain levels of unreliability. You'll never get data which is like, I trust it with my life. It will never like removing those can be very helpful for us and I hope for the product teams as well.
Mhm. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. Then one last question for today, and I ask you this before we started the stream here. Like we use the term nowadays like data-informed decision making and data-driven decision making. Is this just two sides of the same coin, or do you make distinguishments between these two terms?
Honestly, no, I don't, because I also think the definitions for these things are so loose that it's hard to draw a line that we can be like, well, no, we were informed before we were driven. Now we're informed. So I think for me, I'm happy as a data person that it's at least it's like a theme that people think about. Oh, okay, we need to be that. And then the questions that come after are the more relevant questions. Like, what does that mean? And how can I actually be that instead of putting that on my website? And that's enough for me to say you can say whatever, like data driven data. If you say that, I probably know you're looking to then integrate some of these data things in your decisions or understand the data. I mean, understand what that dashboard really represents. I think we were talking about this that as data people, we always see when we present a graph, there's this primary message. You see the graph and you're like, oh, wow, we're doing great in the third quarter. And then there's like the hidden second parameters. And we're so excited to share that with you so that, you don't have to always take in your decisions, but it could always be another layer of knowledge that you have along with yeah, we're doing great in quarter three, for example. So yeah, I haven't, haven't been able to draw a line between those two. Also, I'm very careful when I say that when I'm trying to help other companies and organizations because it's dangerous to use that word. But I like the the personality that comes with it, and I'm
Mhm.
happy that people are adopting that personality.
Awesome. Thank you for the answer. Thank you. Before we closing down, Joy, do you have any closing remarks, maybe one last advice, maybe also for the new person in that topic?
I would say the best thing I've done and the most amazing thing I've found on LinkedIn is actually meeting people and having like direct conversations. So instead of like I used to follow a lot of posts and post a lot, but what's helped me is just having direct one-on-one conversations with people and just learning about stuff and exchanging ideas. Please do that. Please reach out to all of us, and we're happy to build this community. And also, please thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure actually talking to you guys. Yeah.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you. And yeah, that might be the last or second last slide. We are hiring, mentioned this in the beginning. You saw the happy faces. If you also want to be on that slide with a happy face, the QR code is on the left side. On the right side is your newsletter. Yeah, feel free to sign up on this. We post very interesting things there to keep you up to date. And with that, thank you very much, everyone, for joining here. Again, Joy, thanks for presenting today, answering all our precious questions. Feel free to go on our Meetup page to sign up for the next events. We have our Telegram channel. We have podcasts on Spotify. I also talked there a couple of months ago, and we have continuously new episodes there as well. And with that, I wish you all a great after work, wherever you are in the world. Maybe it's also good morning for you. Then have a good start in the day. And with that,